I'm Todd Wine, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast. You're invited to join my mission to embrace and share the innovations transforming the AEC, MEP, and manufacturing industries. Today, I am joined by a best-selling author and expert on small houses, energy efficiency, and prefabrication. Sheri Koones has written several books, including Pre-Fabulous World and her most recent one, Downsize, Living Large in a Small House. Welcome to the podcast, Sheri.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Can you start by just giving a brief background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. I had been in the fashion industry and took off time from working to build a house for my family. And there was so much that I didn't know. I did a ton of research. And when I realized that there were so many better ways to do things than the way I was finding in books, I wrote my first book so that I could help other people avoid some of the pitfalls that I was experiencing. So I wrote that first book, planned to go back to industry, and the book did actually quite well, and I got a request from another publisher to do 2 more books. And since I still didn't know a whole lot about home construction as much as I would have liked, I wrote a book called House About It, which covered all aspects of construction, roofing, siding, windows, doors, etc. And while I was doing that, I watched a friend of mine's house being built with modular construction, and I was so taken with it, I decided to write my second book, which was part of my contract, on modular mansions. And I wrote it about mansions because whenever I mentioned modular, everybody said, oh, those tacky little ugly houses. And so I found the biggest, most elaborate modular houses that I could. And I traveled around and shot a lot of really beautiful houses. And after I did that, I got a call from actually another publisher who asked me to do a book. And I realized at that point that there were a lot of other types of prefab construction. And so I wrote a book called Prefabulous, covering 7 different types of prefab construction. But along the way, as I started doing this, and of course never went back to my previous career, I realized that houses could be built more energy efficiently and more sustainable. And along the journey of writing these books, the houses did in fact become more energy efficient and more sustainable. So I wrote the next book, Prefabulous and Sustainable, and then Prefabulous and Almost Off the Grid. And my publisher wanted me to do a book on the world houses, and I did. And that was really eye-opening about how efficiently and beautifully houses were being built around the world. And again, I started seeing that smaller worked really well, and I started writing about small houses. So my journey in writing has really gone from just writing about the best methods of construction to really the most efficient, healthy, and sustainable types of construction. And this book is really a culmination of a lot of information that I've gotten over the years. It includes some prefab houses, some site-built houses and renovations. And all of the houses are very energy efficient, sustainable, they require less maintenance. And really that's the ideal. And that's really my goal, is to share with people the most ideal way to build a house.
Love that. I love the organic just nature of that story too, of how you got into the small house movement and the prefabricated. And what kind of grabbed your attention about prefab and the small house?
Well, prefab just became important to me because it is such a more efficient way of building. I've been to prefab factories. I've watched prefab houses going up. They take less time, they're more efficient. They a lot of times have much more insulation. It's easier to put the insulation in when it's being built in a factory. There are a multitude. I could do a whole meeting on the reasons for people to build prefab. But the small house idea really came because I think that people are really leaning towards smaller houses. A lot of people, include older people, want to live in a more right-sized house. And I found with this book that even younger people, millennials, are interested in living smaller. They are getting married at an older age. They're having fewer children. They are more interested in experiencing outdoor activities, bicycling, skiing, athletics, and they don't want to be home taking care of a house and doing maintenance. So I think really everybody, young and old, are more interested in living in a more environmentally friendly, more efficient, saving money on energy, and having a less maintenance house. There's this whole movement towards tiny houses, which are not practical for everybody because for a variety of reasons. They're not connected to the grid. They are, they're not safe in earthquake areas and hurricane areas. And I think a lot of people don't want composting toilets. So there's a lot of reasons that there's a lot of deficits in tiny houses, although they're great for some people. But that whole movement just shows that people are interested in living smaller.
Maybe let's take a step back. What can you kind of unpack what the small house movement is? What constitutes a small house?
A small house means different things, obviously, to different people. I moved from a 6,800 square foot house to a 1,400 square foot house. So for me, 1,400 is a small house. For some people, 1,000 square feet is small, or, you know, I've covered houses in my books that are 400 square feet. The thing that makes my house, the houses in my books different from the tiny houses is that they have foundations, and they meet the universal code or the local codes.
Interesting. So you unpacked it a little bit at the beginning there, but can you kind of briefly describe what your book Downsize is about and kind of the inspiration of why you wrote it?
The book explains, the book demonstrates how people can live smaller and still be extremely comfortable. And I think it's inspirational for people to see how bright and beautiful small houses can be. There are 33 houses in this book, different styles. Some are modular, some are site built, some are renovations, but all of them are really lovely. They are all very comfortable. They all have great storage, and it has not been a sacrifice for any of these homeowners to live in a smaller house. As a matter of fact, most of the homeowners that I interviewed told me that they felt liberated moving from a larger house to the houses that they are living in this book.
No, that makes total sense. And as you are going through the book, what I really liked was just seeing all the light and airiness of these houses, that you looked like you would go into that space and it was just totally wide open, and you felt that sense of, I can see the sense of freedom coming through in there, of just how they rearranged what could be a small cramped space, but made it seem so open and just breathable.
I think what I also try to do is show people what aspects of construction and design will make the house feel bigger than it is. So there's a lot of different qualities that all of these people used, having lots of light, having light colored walls, high ceilings, having a lot of storage so that they didn't have a lot of stuff laying around. And so there were lots of ways that these people were able to make the houses feel more comfortable and airy. Yeah. Nobody really said that they felt the house was too small. One couple said that initially they felt like the husband and wife felt like they were on top of each other more than usual, but then they said they got used to it and they really liked it, found it comfortable.
Yeah, you're going to adapt to whatever space you are in. As long as you go into it with a positive attitude and figure out how to make it work, I think people can get creative with it. What are some of the kind of top 2 or 3 tips that you've learned in studying the small house movement of how to make that house feel bigger? You mentioned storage is a big deal a bit ago, but any tips that you can share?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that make a house feel larger, and having, of course, having storage so that stuff is not laying around is a big aspect. But there's also creative decorating, having items that are multi-purpose. For example, having a pull-out couch in a living room or in an office so that you have multi-purpose space. I have an office myself where I'm speaking now, and I have a futon so that when one of my children comes home from wherever they are, they have a place to stay. We have plenty of places in this very small house for guests, and having furnishing that opens up to hold storage. I have a coffee table that opens up for storage, and a dining table that opens up and can seat more people. So having furnishing that is flexible, having rooms that are flexible, using light colors, having high ceilings. I really have a whole list of aspects in the book that people can look through to find ways to make the house feel bigger.
Yeah, is having that kind of multi-functional storage, is that kind of a crucial component to making the small house more workable and feel big?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And everybody that I interviewed was concerned about energy efficiency. Everybody wanted to lower their energy bills. And so they all worked at making their house energy efficient, using less energy, and creating the house so that, not that they had to create more energy, but that they needed less energy. Mm-hmm. And that's done with having great insulation and excellent windows, well-placed windows, having an insulated foundation. So all of those things applied in these houses, and they're really a group of very ideal houses. I went through many, many houses before selecting these, and these were all designed by really knowledgeable architects and designers, and were all really well done, and they're all inspirational. I think everybody that looks at this book says they find it incredibly inspirational, and it makes them want to, if they haven't downsized already, want to downsize.
Can you speak to the criteria of, you said you went through a bunch of houses. What was the criteria there to decide what one was going to make it in the book and not?
All of the houses had to be less than 2,000 square feet. Okay. They needed to be energy efficient and low maintenance, and of course beautiful, because if I showed a bunch of houses and they were unattractive, then I don't think anybody would be interested or inspired to downsize. Right. So those were some of the criteria, and I think all of them really met that criteria. And I wanted a variety of styles, a variety of locations, from the West Coast to the East Coast and Canada. I wanted houses that were different periods, and I also wanted a mix of prefab, site built, and also some renovations, so people could see some really wonderfully done renovations.
That's awesome. Can you speak to the generational divide, or maybe lack thereof, in this small house movement?
Yeah, I think that originally when I started doing this book, I thought that most of the homeowners would be boomers, older people. But what I found was that there was a lot of younger people as well that were interested in living small, again, because they didn't want to do a whole lot of maintenance, and they were more concerned with traveling and doing other things and not spending money on energy, but spending money on activities. And a lot of homes, even millennials, both people in the relationship are working. And when they have free weekends, they want to either do activities with themselves, or if they have children, spend time with their children. And I think people have realized that they don't need so much space. I think a lot of people are watching these tiny house shows and they see that there can be creative use of space and that everybody doesn't need to have a lot of space to be happy. As a matter of fact, one of the couples that I interviewed for this book was in California, and they bought a house that was close to the ocean, and that was the reason that they chose it. And they could have made the house larger than it is when they renovated it. And they said it wasn't going to make them any happier to have more space. And so they just reconfigured the space, brought in more light, and very happy with the space that they have, which was small.
I can definitely relate to that as millennial myself, but that was a big criteria when my wife and I were looking for houses a few years ago. We're slightly over the 2,000 square foot mark, but we didn't want a bigger house that we had to upkeep, and we wanted that smaller, cozier feel that we could go out and do different activities and then come back and have our house and clean it up in 20 minutes. It was great.
And then of course, boomers also want smaller space because their children have left, and they don't need all that space. And a lot of the people not only wanted less space, but they wanted a different style design in their house. If they were very traditional, maybe they wanted something much more modern. If they lived in the suburbs, they wanted to live closer to the city so that they could walk places. And some people that live closer to the city said, I just want to have a lot of open space. And so they wanted to go to the country. So in addition to having smaller space, people just wanted a different style of living.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. Can you speak to how prefabrication plays into the small house movement as well?
I think that prefab is an excellent way to build, whether it's very large or very small. I think it's a very efficient way of building. If I was building a new house myself, I would definitely build it in a prefab method, because I built my own house, my house that I lived in previously, and I watched the rain pouring in on the wood and soaking things. And I just, having seen prefab houses being built and set, it's just such a better way to build. So I think whether it's large or small, prefab is an excellent way. And there's several different methods of prefab. And for people that are interested in learning more about prefab, I've written several books that just focus on prefab. And actually the book that I wrote previous to this was Prefabulous Small Houses. And all of those houses are under 2,500 square feet, and they were all prefabricated in different ways, with structural insulated panels and modular and different panelized methods. So that's a good way for people to really learn about prefab. And it's still, that type of construction is still close to my heart.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love prefab around here. What do you see as the adoption of prefab in construction?
I think that it's a growing method of construction. There's fewer people that want to work outside in the cold or in difficult conditions. And so we're seeing that even commercially, prefab is really taking hold and is on the increase. So I think it is the wave of the future. It's been edging up slowly as a method of construction. I think that the surprising thing, after having spoken about it at major conferences and written several books about prefab, there's still a lot of misconception about what prefab even is. And I think people still think of it as little tacky houses, but actually any house that can be built site built pretty much can be built as a prefab, and faster, and in many cases much better.
Well, you set me up for my next question perfectly there, because the knock on prefab homes is that they're square and they're not necessarily the prettiest aesthetic to look at. How do you combat that and go, well, actually, you got a wrong misconception of prefab there?
Well, the way that I tried to combat that was by doing several beautiful books on prefab. All of the houses in my last several books, there are several prefab books, prefabulous books, all of them have beautiful houses, and they're all different styles, from modern to very traditional, and they're all over the country. So there's lots of opportunity for people to see the different types of prefab that have been done. And I know when I meet people, they still ask me if they're little tacky cottages, and I'm always surprised because I have extensively covered the whole area of prefabrication.
Yeah. So anytime somebody asks you that, you should just whip out a prefabulous book and be like, "This is all you need here. Read this, then ask me again."
What I also try to do in all of my books, including this one, is give people a lot of information. So as much as they are coffee table books, they also have a lot of sidebars that describe different methods and different materials and systems. So I hope that they help people to build better houses. I have gotten notes from a lot of people saying that after reading my book, they would never build a site-built house again, and that they did learn. So that's very gratifying to me, that people are learning to build a better house as a result of these books.
Yeah, for sure. So you've talked about energy efficiency and sustainability. What's the impact of the small house movement on energy efficiency and sustainability?
Well, of course, having less space means less energy. And a lot of the houses have fewer hallways, for example, and the less hallways means less place to heat and cool. I don't think that there's any more advantage to having less energy, more efficient house in a small house than a large house. Any house should be built to be more energy efficient. But obviously, if you build a smaller house, you're going to need less energy because it's just smaller. You use less materials. And all houses should be built with aspects that will make the house more efficient. As I mentioned earlier, having great insulation in the walls, the roofing, the foundation, and having better windows, and having systems that are appropriate for the size of the house. So that should be in all houses, including small houses.
Yeah, totally agree there. What trends do you see in the construction industry?
I think that there is a tremendous shortage of housing. There are a lot of people who want smaller houses. I can see in my own town, I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, and a lot of the large houses are on the market for a very long time. And as soon as a small house comes on the market, it's selling immediately. So I think there are a lot of people who cannot afford a larger house or don't want a larger house. So I think that there are a lot of people, a lot of construction people are thinking now about smaller spaces. There's also a lot of homeless people in this country, and we're trying to figure out how to combat that. There are some companies that are working with organizations to try to build smaller houses. US Modular in California just put up 4 houses for women in need, and worked with an organization that helped them do that. So I think that's one important aspect. The other is that there's a new type of construction called accessory dwelling units, which has been around for a long time, but they weren't allowed in a lot of places. And because there's a need for housing, and in a lot of areas, they don't want high rises. And so in order to add density without a lot of high rises, a lot of areas are now opening up their codes to allow for ADUs, and they are popping up in a lot of places around the country, and they're very, very helpful for people that have the space in their property to build a small structure. I have one house called a granny pad in the book. The grandmother was sort of moving around to different houses after her husband died, and one of her grandchildren built this little house for her out of the garage, and it's really beautiful, and it's very comfortable for her, and they have a built-in babysitter, so it's
win-win
for everybody. So I've been writing actually about ADUs for a while, and I think they are the wave of the future. There are a lot of restrictions depending on the area that they're being built, but they're a great way to add density again without having to build a lot of high rises, and they also are affordable for people that need them, such as a millennial who is getting married and needs a private space and can't afford to go and buy a house, and so they are able to live close by family and have a nice place. Yeah. Another actually ADU in the book, which was really interesting, was a couple who actually bought a house that needed some renovation and had enough land to put an ADU. They renovated the house, which was under 2,000 square feet, I believe, and they rented that out and built themselves an ADU on the property. So they're basically probably living free and clear.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah. Do you have a favorite house that you spotlighted in your book?
No, I think I really like so many of them. There are so many fabulous houses. As I said, I was very selective in choosing them. Yeah. A lot of these architects that design these houses I've worked with in the past, and they're some of the best architects in the country and in Canada, and they really know how to build beautiful and efficient houses. So if I didn't like a house, I didn't include it, and it was really kind of personal, as all of my books are. And so I really think that all of the houses in this book are quite attractive and efficient and really very special.
That's awesome. Well, I concur. Looking through the book, I mean, they're beautiful. You did a great job on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. How do people get in touch with you and or purchase your books?
People can check out my website, which is www.sherikoones.com. And my books are available in lots of independent bookstores, and of course, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And a lot of libraries have bought this book. There's been great interest in this book. So it is really available almost everywhere that books are sold. And if it's not sold in your local store, then you could ask for it.
Love it. That's right. Do it.
And also, people can check out my articles. I write a lot about home construction and different positive aspects of construction in Forbes.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sheri, for taking the time and sitting down and talking with us. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And if you guys are interested in learning any more, you can for sure visit Sheri's website, or you can visit our sponsor, Applied Software, at ASTI.com for more information. You can listen anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegap.pod.com. Until next time, I'm Todd Wyant, thanking you for joining us on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.